So I was born in 1963, and he was born way before me. And as a baby, he held me, almost embarrassing me, changed my diaper probably a time or two. No, you didn't?
No.
Okay, I heard you did. And but my dad and him were very good friends for a long time, and he's more blood than just a friend. He's always referred to him as my second father, and we've been together for me since day one. And I joined the fire department as a volunteer in 1979, and it was at the same station he was a paid fireman at, and it's just the way it started out for me.
When did you become a fireman, Chuck?
In October of 61, I was a volunteer. And then in July of 64, I became a paid firefighter in Arlington. So, his dad was one of the first volunteers I met at Clarendon. And we hit it off. And like you said, I got a phone call from his dad. Says, "You got to come over to the house. I got something to show you." Well, he collected a lot of fire apparatus and memorabilia and stuff and equipment, and I figured he had something neat. Well, I'll go over there, and they had just come back from the hospital with Randy in their arms. So my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we had gone over there, and we got to hold him. I think before, David wasn't even born.
He wasn't even born
yet.
yet.
Yeah, before Jack and
and Lonnie.
And Lonnie saw him. So, and it's been downhill ever since then. And we used to do a lot.
He's kidding.
We used to no, it didn't. We used to do a lot of fire buffing together, and it'd be nothing like in the middle of the evening or something. Get a phone call from his dad. Second alarm in Baltimore, and they're on their way over. Our kids would jump in the car, and we'd all take off and go to Baltimore. And there was some real interesting trips.
Yeah, I mean, it was before traffic. I mean, we could literally hear a fire in Baltimore and be there in an hour. Mm-hmm. You can't do that now. But a lot of good times going up and down the BW Parkway.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm a third generation Arlington firefighter. My grandfather, they migrated down from Atlantic City, New Jersey back in 1943. And at that point, the Arlington Career Fire Department was only 3 years old. So my grandfather joined the fire department in 1943. He retired. He was the very first career firefighter to retire. I think it was September 1st of 1955. And the reason he had to retire, they had a pretty catastrophic fire engine accident at Pershing Drive and Glebe Road where two fire trucks collided. And he ended up, he broke his pelvis, and he had to retire from that injury. So both of his sons, my father and my uncle, they joined the department. My father in 1956 and my uncle in 1957. And they both worked here till about 79. So when my father officially retired is when I officially started as a volunteer. And then I volunteered for several years and finally got hired on the paid department in 1984. And I've stayed for 35 years. I just retired in 2019.
And you ended up as a chief, or what was your emphasis?
I ended up, the title was Captain 2, which was a station commander. Yeah, that was when I got hired. I was told the two best ranks in the fire department was firefighter and captain. And my goal was to become a captain. And it took like 14 years, but I eventually got promoted. And then a few years after that, they opened up this Captain 2, and I got promoted to that.
I tell you, we were a family, and it got together on holidays and everything. Of course, Frank was on a different shift than I was.
Oh, I thought y'all were both on C shift.
No, I was started on A platoon.
Oh, okay.
And then, we didn't see each other that much, and we go to flea markets and parades and stuff like that. And of course, with Randy and then his brother David came along, and we had two boys, so they were all the same age. And I had a antique fire truck. Well, I had two of them, but one of them was mine. And
a real fire truck?
Yeah, a 47 Diamond T, Orin. And they'd come over and help work on the fire truck, and then we would put it in parades.
I remember. I remember that time he was changing the front brakes on it, and he had it sitting up on some wooden blocks. And somebody leaned on the fire truck, and this thing started shifting over, and we're all over on the side trying to hold it up, and he's screaming, "Hold it up!" we saved it, but man, I tell you, that was scary.
And but we had a lot of fun together, and my family, my grandfather was a captain in the D.C. Fire Department, and I had taken the examination for D.C. and Arlington the same week. And my dad asked me, he says, "Well, who are you going to go with?" I said, "The first one that called." And Arlington called me, and I went to work for Arlington. I told him I'd take the job. And DC called me that afternoon. And two of the chiefs over in DC were my grandfather's driver and tillerman. He was at 9 Truck over in DC. He was a captain. And his driver and the tillerman on the ladder truck were now chiefs, and they both called me and asked me when I was coming to work for DC. And I said, I already taken a job in Arlington. I let Arlington make the decision for me. So.
But I'd forgot to even mention earlier that I said I was 3rd generation. I think I was 4th generation because my great-great-grandfather started as a fireman in Atlantic City, New Jersey in 1898. And he became a member of their paid fire department in 1904. And he worked, his entire working career spanned from 1898 until he retired in 1944. And he died in 1945. You know, but he was one of the firefighters in February 5th of 1904. They had what is known as the Great Baltimore Fire. It burnt down pretty much the entire Inner Harbor area as we know it today of Baltimore. Very, very serious fire. And the mayor of Baltimore was making frantic calls all over the East Coast looking for help to fight that fire. And they had firefighters from DC, some other Maryland departments, Philadelphia, and Atlantic City. And he was one of the ones that came down and fought that fire. You know, it's a neat part of history, something I'm really proud of.
What is it that drives you? Because it's a different energy around firefighting. Would you agree?
It's not a job.
No, it's not.
I never looked at it as a job. Never. It was just something that we loved to do. And I guarantee you, the worst day on the job is better than any day sitting in an office behind a desk.
Yeah.
You know?
And everything's different every day. I've worked both civilian jobs and fire department. And you go in, it's the same thing every day. You take this piece of paper and move it over here or whatever, stock this shelf or whatever. Fire department, you go in, you may get the housework done in the morning, you may get breakfast, but you don't know what you're going to be doing from minute to minute. It was really, really good, and it kept everything.
9/11 would be a perfect example.
Yep.
Go to work that morning, and then, a couple hours later, the world changed. Who could foresee that?
What is that thing that you're talking about that is better to be in the office? What is that? Is like being in the moment? What is it?
I don't know. It's kind of hard to just put your finger on it. It's just ingrained in, I'd say, with your personality. I mean, there's a certain type of person that becomes a firefighter, a police officer, a public servant. But I think speaking on from the fire side, it's just that drive. And for both of us, it was a family history. It was like I never considered doing anything else. There was no options.
Yep.
There was no options. I went to community college I was going to be a draftsman. After about 5 minutes sitting in class, I was done. I one day of drafting class, and I left early and never went back. I was like, I'm going to be a firefighter, and here we are.
What does a day like today signify for you as firefighter?
I'll tell you, it's a bittersweet thing, really. I look at the names on that memorial out there. Some I didn't know, but I know their legacy. And I know that legacy because of this memorial. We keep those names alive. But it's it's good to see the families come out and okay. It's good to see the families come out because I think it means a lot to them because a lot of the families, it's not like a family tradition in the fire service. A lot of them really don't know, and they come here and they see how their fellow firefighters felt, and they hear the stories and just chatting with these people and telling stories about their parents or their spouses or something like that, and the kids are like, I never knew that about them, and they really enjoy you sharing. So it all goes back to family. We're a big family, and today just I guess is the centerpiece of that.
How does a day in your life look?
Well, I was going to say, it usually starts with housework, but I knew Chuck,
I never did one in my life.
If you went to Fire Station 4 and dusted all the brooms for fingerprints, you'd never find one of his.
Never find it. Never find it. I did most of the cooking. So while the guys were doing the housework, I would make breakfast. Well, first of all, when you came in, you checked the piece of equipment you're assigned to, make sure your gear was intact, and did those things. And then they turned to and started doing the housework. And I would start breakfast, and then after breakfast, it cleaned up. And we'd have different activities to do, sometimes painting on the apparatus or doing projects around the station. And 9 times out of 10, it'd be interrupted. I think one day we tried to paint the fire station one time. It took like 3 days because every time we started to paint, we got a call. So, it's one of those types.
And one of the things Chuck's leaving out, because like you said, he was a cook. He was a good cook. Had ate many of his meals. And he's never led on to this, but it's alleged that the cook never did dishes. When he would cook, he could be cooking oatmeal. And when you go in there to do the dishes, there'd be 10 pots and pans in the sink. And everybody thinks that he used to just pull pots out and just put them in the sink so somebody'd have to wash them. He's never told us if that's true or not. But anywhere years ago, if you went in the county and there was a lot of dishes left over, they would all go, "Oh, Chucky must have trained you."
The statute of limitations hadn't run out on that yet, so I can't.
That was funny.
No comments.
No comment on that one. But what happened one day after I retired, I went to visit my shift that was on duty. And they had some fish. I never cooked fish in an oven. I think it's sacrilege. You fry it. And they got a call. So I said, I'll watch it for you. Well, the apparatus hadn't even left the station yet, and I started pulling pots and pans out and putting them all in the stove.
Confirmed.
And they came back, and I said, "See you guys," and walked out the door. But one thing about doing all the cooking for the guys on the shift, when I retired, they dedicated a room to me in the fire station. Had a nice brass plaque up there, the Chuck Satterfield Memorial Bathroom, because they claimed I sent more people to the bathroom by my cooking. But
yeah, the only person to have a bathroom in Arlington County named after him.
Creates more community. I see.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that true?
Oh, it definitely creates the bond.
you had 2 families. You had the family that you were, when you put the uniform on, that you were with for that. We used to work day work and night work, and then we went to a 24-hour shift. So when it became a 24-hour shift, to me, it changed the culture a little bit.
It changed the dynamics 100%.
And
in what way did it change?
well, when you were on day work, you had 4 days that you're off during the daytime. You're on day work. When you went on night work, you had 4 days you were off during the daytime, and then you had your 4 days off. 24.
And I'm sure listeners that made sense.
Well, I'm sure it did too. Well, you worked day work. You worked from 7:45 in the morning to 5:45. Night crew came in at 5:45 to 7:45 in the morning. And it was just like going to a regular 9-to-5 job, really, And night work, you came in. You had been with your family all day long, which gave you a lot of time to do things with your children if you had children at the time. and you didn't have to worry about trying to get them in bed at night because you weren't going to be there when you're on night work.
Exactly.
So, and then you had your 4 days break. And every station I was in, it didn't take you long to be part of everybody's business in that station, and they looked out for you.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough when I first came on, I went over to Cherrydale. I had captain that came on in 1940 something. He was one of the first firefighters, and his wagon driver, the driver the first piece out, he was about the same age, and I had two other guys that were pretty close to my age. One fellow was just a couple years older, and then another fellow I went to high school with. And you know, you could relate to everybody in the station, and they looked out for you. And I've even heard guys say that Captain so-and-so, or Lieutenant so-and-so, or Firefighter so-and-so gave them advice over the years on living, on relationships. And it,
We had a bunch of financial wizards on the fire
my God,
department.
yes, we sure
I'm glad
did.
I didn't follow some of their advice.
Yeah,
though.
right. And I went down to Station 5, and it was still a mix of like Korean War veterans. And of course, I was a veteran. I was in the Coast Guard, and so I mixed in with them. And it became family. And but tried to pass that on as I got older in the department to the younger guys coming in, and it worked out fairly well over the years.
I know when Chuck came on, the fire apparatus we were using was one run away from going to the junkyard. I mean, it was really, it was like really inexpensive equipment because we just didn't have the budget back then.
Right.
And when I came on in '84, we still had some of those fire trucks, and it was unbelievable. It was unreliable and it just didn't have the power and stuff. But we started evolving, so I got to see the latter portion of the fire department's evolution with the protective equipment that we wore and the breathing apparatus that they used to wear. Breathing apparatus it was just a filter canister. It didn't even have compressed air or anything. It was a charcoal canister, and that's what they would go into the fires with. And on the funny thing, on the filter canister, it had a warning: do not use in oxygen-deprived environments. Well, when you go into a fire, if there's anything there but oxygen, with all the smoke. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. But when I left, we had air packs that self-contained breathing apparatus, and they're filled with compressed air, not oxygen like people think. They would last almost an hour if you can control your breathing. We had protective equipment. We were totally enveloped in protective equipment, hoods. We had the bunker pants, fire-resistant clothing. Our gloves had a special liner in them to prevent steam burns. When Chuck came on, had metal aluminum helmets that conducted heat. They had the coats were canvas, which that really wasn't bad.
Canvas stuff. When I first came on, we had these filter masks. We also had Scott air packs, which were self-contained breathing apparatus. They were kept in boxes on the top of the fire truck, buried under other kinds of tools and appliances. I can remember catching the devil from a battalion chief. I'm not going to mention Pinky's name. And
Good.
I had a Scott air pack on when everybody else had a filter mask. And where'd you find that, boy? I said, up in the top of the fire truck. Why you got that? I said, because the captain's going to send me in the basement. That's the only time we used a self-contained breathing apparatus that was going below grade. And one of the sad things is when we were talking about Archie Hughes passing away, I had just left the fire station. I was in recruit school, and Archie had been helping me with hydraulics, the study of movement of water. I left there, picked up my girlfriend, and we were going over somewhere, and his dad come running out. But the sad part, and told us that there's a terrible fire and we were called back to work. Come to find out, Archie had one of the MSA canister masks on up in the attic. And we were using it up until that period of time. And then slowly we got away from that. We used to wear 3/4 boots. The boot would come up at mid-calf.
They're like fishing boots.
Like fishing boots, and you pulled them up. The fire department had ordered a bunch of polyester pants, uniform pants. When I first came on, we wore they were in the transition from gray pants with a blue stripe so you couldn't use it off duty, and light blue shirts. Then they went to khakis, which were cotton, and then they went to these polyester pants, and now they're wearing fire retardant gear because the stuff just melted.
It's all made out of Nomex.
And the turnout gear was duck coats, aluminum helmet. Let's see.
The plastic fireball gloves.
No, we used rather leather gloves.
Oh, like utility gloves.
You use a regular utility glove, and I got scars from them. But and it gradually came up, and Nomex hoods came out. We were wearing those for a while, and then they went to leather helmets and fire retardant gear. But the apparatus, getting back to the apparatus, I stopped in the fire station one day after I retired, and one of the young firefighters was saying that, "Oh, this fire truck's 4 years old." He says, "It's ready to be gone. It's getting to be a piece of junk." I told him I rode fire apparatus that was born. I was 2 years old when it was put in service. And, you know, it was just amazement, the things that, but they got the job done at the time. I think one of the biggest things with the fire department today was it started just after I retired. They got a buyback program from the manufacturer of the apparatus. So every 5 to 7 years, was it 10 years on a ladder truck?
Yeah,
It's something
I
like
don't know
that.
what it is.
Yeah. But they would run it until the wheels fell off of it, literally. I mean, they did. Some apparatus, the wheels fell off.
Well, when I came on, we were driving fire trucks that were 30 years old already.
Yeah.
It's absolute junk.
All firefighters paid today as
No, I think statistically today across the country, I think it's like in the 75% range of departments are still volunteer in the country. So essentially, you know, in the beginning of the firefighting days, probably back in the 1800s, that's all you had were volunteers. It was just groups of citizens banding together, forming a fire company.
For their own protection.
They're just protecting their neighbors and themselves. And then the insurance companies got involved in there was a thing like they had plaques. People had plaques on their house to prove that they had insurance. So the volunteer fire departments would go to the house, put the fire out. If you had a plaque on your house, because the firemen would get reimbursed from the insurance company. And if they showed up and you didn't have that plaque on your house, it burnt. The neighbor that had the plaque and paid insurance, they would protect his house, but your house would burn if it didn't have a plaque. So, I mean, that's how the fire service started. And then it progressively, they realized, we need to pay these folks to do this job because we need them 24 hours a day. Then, they started in the big major cities, New York and Chicago and, D.C.
Well, Washington, D.C.
They never had volunteers, did they?
Yeah, they had volunteers up until the Civil War. And then they became a paid fire department. The same with New York City. In fact, during the Civil War, the volunteers, firefighters in New York, formed a Union infantry company called the Zouaves, New York Zouaves. And they lost all their firefighters because they went to fight the war. So they brought people in and had to pay them. And DC was about the same time. They started hiring paid firefighters in the 1860s. And it's out of necessity. A couple of years ago, I was down to Virginia State Firemen's Convention. and I was asked a question about why. It was a volunteer retention, or volunteer firefighter retention group, and they wanted to know what had gone through. Well, Arlington was at one time was a farming community, and summer homes. Get away from the heat in the city, come out here. And as it grew up, the need for fire protection grew, and the volunteer fire companies, Clarendon was one of them that started by a civic association. And they grew and grew and grew, and then, of course, today you're losing volunteers because, number one, the cost of living, the cost of a family, you have to work a job. A lot of times people would close their business up and go to the fire call. I mean, they're still in the community, but the store was closed, the barber shop was closed, they went to fight the fire. Now people, the husband, the wife, sometimes work 2 part-time jobs, just don't have the activity anymore. Life's gotten too complicated over all these years. And so the volunteers are fading. Like I was telling Randy one time, I said, when I first joined Clarendon as a volunteer back in '61, I was one of the youngest members. Well, I'm probably one of the youngest members. Still.
No, I'm the youngest
member.
member.
You're the youngest member.
I'm the youngest member.
But yeah, and because over the years, it has just grown. We've got a full-time paid fire department here in Arlington now. Let's see what I was going to say. But other than that, that's all I got. You got anything?
Are there more people applying to be a firefighter today in this modern era than back in the day?
No.
Is it easy?
No.
Talk about that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about it. Do we lack firefighters?
Yeah, it's very difficult to retain firefighters. It's very difficult to retain police officers. And a lot of that has come about is when Chuck and I were in the department, we looked at this as a career. When I signed the papers, I never thought I was going to leave the department to do any other job. Mm-hmm. I knew I was there for 30 years. No options. Guys today are coming in, they're very educated, they've got degrees, and they're having a hard time getting out of college finding a job. Well, fire departments are always hiring, police departments are always hiring. The guys are taking the jobs, to make money, pay back their student loans. And they've always got their eye open for that next best thing. Now, I'm not saying that about everybody, but I know for a fact, I've worked with dozens of people that have come here to get a job, get a paycheck, and they're gone in 5 years.
So that maybe they need to get paid more.
Yeah, that's it.
Go to their chosen career.
So I've watched all of these videos on YouTube over the years, and at the end, they're always doing an interview. And all of those interviewees, and folks can go back to YouTube and watch these videos again. All of the people that were interviewed have been my mentors when I first came on. And it's ironic, and it's kind of bittersweet in a way. I look at these guys, and when I came on, they were in their 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. I was 20 when I came on. And these guys that you've interviewed were in their, some of them were in their 30s, 40s. Some of them were ready to retire, so they were a little bit older. But I don't remember them as they are in the interviews. So like Bucky Jenkins, and I think it was Bob DeTrapney, and just a bunch of the guys. They were young guys when I came on. And now I'm the old guy. It's kind of a hard thing to really, accept. You look back at these guys who were your mentors and your heroes, and now they're 85, 90. I think Chuck's, 99 now? I think Chucky's about
81.
81. I knew him when he was, in your 20s, but that's the retrospect part. Just seeing these old guys that were young guys when I got hired.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's a value to see everybody's stories, because they are elders and they have a lot of wisdom and talking about equipment evolution and safety,
Oh yeah.
safety protocol getting better.
Yep.
Yep.
I love every
Is it-
time we get together. We have regular get-togethers, retirees get-togethers, and I love every time. I love seeing every one of those guys come in. You know, they each one of them had a part in sculpturing my career throughout the years with either some encouraging words, teaching me something, teaching me not to do something, and so I really respect and enjoy seeing the older members.
And I can tell you have an enormous love and respect for your job.
That I do.
Firefighters.
That I do.
Never didn't look forward to coming to work.
Well,
Well,
yeah, I think there's a couple days that I didn't want to come to work,
like
but you know what?
snowstorms.
Yeah, I used to love working
Yeah.
snowstorms, thunderstorms. That was great. Yeah, a lot of
Most
lot
of the
good-
time, it was a pleasure coming to
Oh
work.
yeah, yeah.
No, I'm being facetious. Even like I said earlier, man, your worst day here is better than any day sitting behind a
Anything
desk.
involved. Yeah, yeah.
Yep, good stuff.
Did your wife call you or your partner call you sometimes? Why aren't you coming home? You're hanging here?
No, I had her.
They
No,
get jealous.
I had her number blocked.
It was funny, you know. When I was down Station 5. I've just finished my probation period. My wife, well, my fiance, and I had set our wedding day up to be after the summer vacation period was over in the fire department, and we got married.
Why was that? Because you just couldn't get off, right? You couldn't get leave.
Couldn't get leave.
Yeah.
So we chose September the 7th. And we got married on September the 7th in 1965. And the captain I had, George Lang, a real character, he told me, "You're not getting married. I'm not going to make sure you don't have any leave to go. I mean, you're not going to be able to get off." So the battalion chief, Pageant, his wife was ill, and my wife used to take care of her at the hospital. And I went to him and I said, "I need some leave." "Oh, don't worry about it." Well, when I first came on the fire department, they gave you all your leave January the 1st. I was hired July, so I got all my leave. Come the end of summer, nobody had any leave. The leave book was wide open. So I went to Patrick, put me in the book, and you know, he really looked out for people. He looked out for me, and Roberta would call down the fire station, and the guys would always give her a hard time, you know. Newlyweds, you know, she didn't know how to cook, you know, so she was going to make bread one time. And I took a loaf of homemade bread down to the fire station. Well, she forgot to put one ingredient in, and she put it in late. That brick was hard as this floor. So we took it in there, and I said, "Berta made bread for us." We couldn't cut it. So when she called down there, the captain says, "Thanks for the wheel chalk." That uncut loaf of bread kicked around that fire station down there for, I guess, 3 years before somebody finally threw it away. But everybody was family. And that included the wives if they wanted to be. Well, my wife was a member of the Company 1 Ladies Auxiliary when I was stationed there. And it'd be, the worst thing I ever did was let her get her driver's license. Because I could walk to work from where we lived. I was at 1. And she got a call, you know, we get a working fire, and here my wife and two boys showed up. You know, have them in tow. I mean, they chase fire engines as well as
Yeah.
we did when we were growing up. And a lot of times, and the ladies, I tell you what, they did a wonderful job, the ladies auxiliary. At one time, we had 3 ladies auxiliaries in Arlington County. We had Company 1 ladies, which were the volunteers. We had the Paid Firefighters Association Ladies Auxiliary. And we had the Falls Church Volunteer Fire Department Ladies Auxiliary. And they'd show up in mass. Kids, you know, who cares?
That was the best sight after a long
Oh, God.
fire, or especially on a cold night. they'd show up as big urns of coffee. I never drank coffee before I got hired. And I'll tell you what, by the time when I retired, I was probably drinking 3 pots a day. As you've heard in previous episodes, practical jokes and some tomfoolery is ever present in the fire service. That's as much a part of the job as going out and serving the public. My very first night staying in a firehouse overnight, back in 1979 when I joined as a volunteer in Clarendon at Company 4, was on Chuck's shift. I spent most of my time on Chucky's shift. It was C shift at Company 4. And when I went down to the firehouse, they didn't have the regular lieutenant there. It was a fill-in lieutenant, a roving lieutenant. Harvey Gunnell was his name. I didn't know him. I've heard of him and stuff, And so they had to make sure, first off, it wasn't a school night because I was still in high school, and I wasn't allowed to stay at the firehouse on a school night. So, I think maybe it was a Friday night. So I'm all excited, I'm going to spend my first night at the firehouse. So I asked Chucky, I said, well, what bed do I sleep in? And I should have known better, but I didn't. He goes, go in the bunk room, the first bed on the right. Go ahead and make that one up. I said, okay. So I went in there and threw my sheets on the bed and everything. And I didn't know it, but the second bed on the right, immediately next to my bed, was Lieutenant Gunnell's bed. Like I said, I didn't know anything about him, but evidently his nighttime routine while he is sleeping is something of legends. So it took me a while to get to sleep, and he came in late, and immediately he started snoring. I'd never heard anything like that. And about an hour later, he sits up straight in bed. He goes, second alarm, let's go, pull another line. And I jumped up. I'm like, oh, we got a fire. And I pulled my boots on. I ran out to the fire truck, and I got on the fire truck. And I'm sitting there. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, damn, these guys are slow getting out of bed. Well, I didn't know it. I mean, he was in the middle of a nightmare or something. So I'm sitting on the fire truck thinking we got a call, and it was all because of Lieutenant Gunnell's nightmare. So I'm like, okay. I got back in bed, and he's still snoring. Well, then he wakes up again. This time, he's, I don't know how to gently put this, he's romantically involved with somebody. And I just sat up in bed and looked at him, and he's going through the whole thing while he was in bed. And I laid down, I was like this the rest of the night. I was petrified of what was coming next. But that was my very, very first experience in the firehouse. And I woke up that next morning, I said, I think I'm going to enjoy this. But he got me so many times. We used to work on our cars inside the firehouse, and I had my mom's 66 Chevy in there working on it one night. I had to go out to do something. I come back in, and he had taken some damn steel wool and fabricated it into it looked like a rat, and he stuck it up under the dashboard. So when I crawled back up, I see this rat up there. It scared the daylights out of me. Banged my head, got a big old goose egg on my forehead trying to get out from underneath the car. And he's standing over just cackling like he usually does. But the practical jokes, man, were the absolute best. Epic.
Speaking about practical jokes, we had a rookie, and very, very conscientious, and he was wanting to do the job real bad. And our pumper, I used to drive the pumper, and it was out of service, so I was on the wagon with them, riding the bucket, the seat behind the driver. And we get on the call, we're going for anything. He'd be all suited up, have his Scott Air pack on, and buttoned up to here, had his hood on. And I'm sitting over there with my coat wide open, kicked back, helmet off, just riding down the road. And Jeff, you take it easy. It's nothing. So, oh, okay, you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. And this went on for a couple times, and all of a sudden, same day, it was one of those days we had multiple calls. And we're going down the road, and Jeff's going to relax a little bit. So he had his coat open. All of a sudden, I'm putting my coat on, snapping up, I'm getting my stuff ready, got my mask turned on, put the Scott Air pack on. And we get back to the car, he says, Jockey, how'd you know? I said, you know when you're going to have a working fire. It's just in your system. And it worried him. And we get back and he says, how'd you know that? I said, I listened to the radio. I said, 10 got on the scene, got smoke showing. But, it's just kind of stuff like that you remember, and it'll stay with you.
And you don't live it down. You don't live it down.
No.
I had an incident happen back in 1994, 95, when I was at Station 9. And one of the guys that was here today goes, hey, you remember that when you drove your mother-in-law's car through the door? I'm like, yeah, I remember that. And mother-in-law's car, and they're changing the brakes on it. And and I got in there to move it back out in the parking lot, and I forgot to pump the brakes back up before I moved it. And man, I was driving through the firehouse, and the door was shut. I was going to stop to open it. Well, I hit the brakes. I didn't have anything. I drove right through the bay door. And our future fire chief was standing there and witnessed it. And I got out of that car. I was cussing and kicking at it. And the fire chief, or my captain, was there having a fit. Oh, he was not happy. And the fire chief, he's standing there and he's like applauding. He goes, I hate to ask what you're going to do for an encore. But that happened, like I said, back in '95, and somebody just brought it up again today. So they'll probably be talking about that at my funeral too.
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Randy.
All right.
We can going on.
Hopefully he edits the stuff. I apologize. He's very long-winded. I apologize for that.
I didn't know you drove through the door.